Sag mir, wo die Männer sind, wo sind sie geblieben? Sag mir, wo die Männer sind, was ist geschehen? Sag mir, wo die Männer sind, zogen fort, der Krieg beginnt. Wann wird man je verstehen? Wann wird man je verstehen? Sag, wo die Soldaten sind, wo sind sie geblieben? Sag, wo die Soldaten sind, was ist geschehen? Sag, wo die Soldaten sind, über Gräben weht der Wind. Wann wird man je verstehen? Wann wird man je verstehen? Sag mir, wo die Gräber sind, wo sind sie geblieben? Sag mir, wo die Gräber sind, was ist geschehen? Sag mir, wo die Gräber sind, Blumen blühen im Sommerwind. Wann wird man je verstehen? Wann wird man je
Ik ben priester, remonstratenserpater.
I am a priest, a Norbertine father, 85 years old and seldom in my abbey. For 51 years I've been travelling all over the world, wherever the church and the people are in need. Or else I've been looking for people who are willing to help me to alleviate this need.
Oder bin ich auf der Suche nach Menschen, die mir helfen wollen, diese Not zu lindern.
Father Werenfried was part of my youth. He came very often to visit my parents. I was at home, and so I saw this huge, big man, all in white. When he came, he always had beautiful stories about what was happening with refugees, and that impressed me enormous. It was in the beginning of the work, and he started to work in 1947, and then he was occupying himself with the Germans who were exiled from Middle and Eastern Europe. And he came and told my parents about his plans, but also about the terrible things he had seen in Germany. My other uncles and aunts, they were normal people and they told about the things of every day, but when he came, he always had fascinating stories. His father was a teacher, and his mother also, and they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. And the 3 boys, all of 3 became priests. There is a very beautiful story that goes with this, because originally his father wanted to become a priest, but then his parents became very poor because 3 sons died in 1 week, and the father of Father Werenfried was the only one who could take care of his parents. So he renounced to become a priest and prayed to our Lord that one day, if he would have a son, that this son would become a priest. And he got 3 sons, and the 3 of them became priests.
When I first met him in the novitiate in Tongalo, he was very skinny and didn't look very well. He was also very ascetic. He didn't eat much, and he tried to live as moderately as he could. But being a student, he was already involved in all kinds of activities.
oorlog was in België gedaan in september 1944. En toen kwam monsieur Noods, onze generaal toen.
In September 1944, after the war was over in Belgium, our provincial at that time, Monsignor Noots, came from Rome to my abbot and said, "The Pope," that was Pius XII, "has asked me to undertake some action in Belgium for the exiled German priests." Then, in 1946, according to the treaties of Yalta and Potsdam, 14 million Germans were exiled to completely Protestant regions of Germany. Among them were 3,000 priests and 6 million Catholics.
En zo ben ik naar Duitsland gegaan. En als ze me vroegen, ja, wat...
So I went to Germany, and when they asked me, "What does the Diocese of Mechelen think of this?" I said, "I received the order from Rome." And I was so shocked by what I saw that I couldn't keep it to myself. So I told the people with great conviction, and it caused an explosion of generosity. This is how the work started, as a reaction to the crisis in Christianity, which was itself the result of a war and of the purge afterwards in the formerly occupied regions, where great sins were committed against love.
Geweldig tegen de liefde gezondigd werd.
In the beginning, he invoked the saying of St. Thomas, "It's hard to lead a virtuous life when you have nothing and when you're starving." That's why he said, we must feed these people, we must give them clothes, we must take care of their children, they must be enabled to rebuild their houses, they must have blankets when winter
We moeten ze
comes.
dekens geven als de winter komt.
Ik had een uitnodiging om te komen spreken op de boerinnengilde.
I was invited to talk to the farmers' wives at their annual reunion. They had coffee and cake, and I was asked to give some words of encouragement. So I told them about the distress of these priests in Germany until their eyes filled with tears. Then I said, "Now it's time for the collection." I turned round and looked at the priest to see if he agreed. He simply said yes. He wasn't able to say more, because tears were rolling over his 3 chins as well. But then I realized that these farmers' wives wouldn't have any money with them, as it was their annual reunion. So I said, "I don't want any money from you. But you certainly have some bacon hanging in the chimney, so I want you all to go home now and cut off a big piece of bacon and bring it to the presbytery tonight. And tomorrow I'll come with a truck, with 2 trucks, to get it." And in this first village I collected 1,400 kilos of bacon. This is how the bacon campaign was born, and this is why they still call me the bacon priest. And as a result of this action, the priests in Germany survived. Then I had to help them with their apostolate, so I got them wheels. He often took new initiatives. He said, for example, "I need 150 cars for the rucksack priests." And everybody said, "You are crazy. 150 cars? Do you know how much that costs? And who is going to organize all this?" But he always succeeded.
Toen ben ik naar Vlaanderen teruggegaan en heb de studenten...
Then I went back to Flanders and mobilized the students and the youth movements. I told them, "I want you to collect, in the next 3 months, the money to buy 100 Volkswagens." I was hoping I would get 60 of them, but one always has to ask a bit more than one hopes for. But within 3 months, the youth of Flanders had collected the money for 140 Volkswagens. And these were then distributed to the rucksack priests.
Quand il parlait, et au fur et à mesure qu'il parlait, il y avait comme une sorte de rayonnement.
When he was talking, it was as if there was a ray of light, which of course made people say, "This man is a saint," or "He has a special gift from God," or "One could see that the grace of God is radiating from his face." I was afraid sometimes, because he kept on making promises. And I said to myself, where will we get the money from? There was no budget, there was nothing. Sometimes he took enormous risks, you know. I had sleepless nights because of this, but he didn't. He had an extraordinary confidence, thoughtless, almost reckless.
Mais lui pas. Il avait une confiance extraordinaire qui allait. Moi je trouvais que c'était parfois.
I told him, if you had a household and ran it like this, you would be ruined by now. But he thought that this was his way of working and God's will.
Mais lui, il trouvait que c'était sa façon de travailler, que c'était la volonté de Dieu.
We had a confrere of Father Werenfried who was in charge of finances, Father Hugo. And this father was a very good bookkeeper and a very meticulous man. And one day he told Father Werenfried, "Werenfried, I'm leaving." And Werenfried said, "Why?" He said, "Because what you have promised this year is impossible. And you are exaggerating." And we said, "But the year is not over." And Father Hugo said, "Yes, but I have calculated, I have even for the month of December taken double, and even then it's not enough. And so I am leaving." And Werenfried said, "Okay, wait a moment. And then he was preaching in Germany, and all of a sudden there comes a phone call from Italy from this Father Hugo. And he says, "What's the matter, Hugo?" Because he never called. And he said, "Listen, an Italian benefactor has given a great amount of money." And we said, "Is it enough to cover the difference?" He said, No, it's not enough. There's still $40,000 missing, but it's enough. I'm happy. No, we said, "We have promised the full amount, so it has to be the full amount." Then he went to Belgium, and he came in a secretariat, and the secretary was sitting there, and she said, "I just opened a package, and it looked like books, and so I let it closed all the time, but now you are coming, and I opened it, and look at this." And this was Austrian money. It had come by train, and it was heavy, and we said, "Count it, and tell me in dollars how much it is." And it was exact the $40,000 that were missing in order to cover the budget. So that father remained till his retirement with us in Rome.
Il était très enthousiaste de son travail.
He was very enthusiastic about his work. One got the impression he wanted to save the whole world, and he didn't think about how much it would cost. On one occasion, for example, he said, "We need to get relief parcels to Berlin. I visited a refugee camp there. The needs are enormous." So he ordered relief parcels, not knowing how he would pay for them, but simply trusting he would find a solution. He wrote letters to his benefactors. He went preaching. He always succeeded. It was already like that in the beginning. It was his word, written or spoken, which made people open their purses and give him all their money, even more than they could really afford.
Même plus que ce qu'il pouvait donner en fait.
Nach der Messen gibt's
After Mass, there would be the procession. I wouldn't know if it was going to rain. When the procession left the church, I would be standing at the back with my hat, with the famous hat of millions. With this hat, I've already been begging for over 50 years. It is a good hat, but a bit damaged. There are some holes in it, so notes would be better than coins.
banknoten.
Il rentrait d'avoir été...
He came back from his preaching. He had big pockets. One pocket was filled with money, the other was filled with letters. And he put everything on the table and said, "Here you are, sort it out."
Hij vertelde een keer in Zwitserland dat hij
He told me that once, while he was preaching in Switzerland, a rich lady came to him after Mass.
en dat ze zeiden,
She said, "Father, you touched me. What can I do to help you?" Well, he said, "I took a collection."
Wel, zegt ze, ik
And
ben
she
een
said,
dame op leeftijd.
"I'm an old lady. I have a necklace here. It must be worth 100,000 Belgian francs. It's yours now. Sell it and use it for your apostolate."
Zo, dat kon niemand. Dat kon alleen weer.
Nobody could preach and collect money like Werenfried. The money he collected was used for the reconstruction of churches, the building of seminaries. In Poland, for example, where he supported the rebuilding of several seminaries. And so the work grew. Then they said, "This church in Eastern Europe is in need, and there's nobody else who can provide it with material help. But there are needs in other parts of the world too, such as in Zaire, in South America and in Asia."
Oud-Belgisch Congo, later Zaire. Er is in Zuid-Amerika.
So he raised a lot of money for the reconstruction of churches and the building of seminaries and churches throughout the world.
Projecten van herstel van kerken, bouwen van seminaries, bouwen van kerken. Dat was een heel fonds apart.
In Italië heet ons werk aiuto alla Chiesa.
In Italy, the name of our work was Aid to the Persecuted Church. That was our most important task at that time, as the time of the rucksack priests in Germany was over. I was called to Rome by the Secretary of State, who said, "You should change the name of your work." I asked him why. He said there were diplomatic reasons for it. There was already a papal nuncio in Yugoslavia, and Tito had twice complained that the work was called Aid to the Persecuted Church, saying, "I don't persecute the church." Of course he did. But when the Pope speaks, that's final for me. So I changed the name into Aid to the Church in Need. And this turned out to be a wise move, because our work was already helping all over the world, not only in Eastern Europe.
Veranderd door kerk in nood, hulp voor de kerk in nood. En dit is eigenlijk een geluk geweest, want ons werk was al bezig om ook elders te helpen, niet alleen in Oost-Europa.
Servo
The work overtook me. I received orders. The first one came from the Pope via Monsignor Nuyts. And when you try to carry out an order as well as you can, trusting that God will help, then you receive other orders. And that's how the work grew. But I never did anything which wasn't approved by the Pope or by the bishops behind the Iron Curtain, who explicitly requested our help.
Zonder dat het gedekt was door de paus of door de bisschoppen achter het ijzeren gordijn, die daar uitdrukkelijk om gevraagd hebben.
What drives Father Werenfried and where does he get his energy from? It cannot be from his good health, because as a child and later on as in the abbey, he was often ill. I think it's the grace of God that what drives him, because humanly speaking, it's very difficult to understand that somebody with a poor health could do all this work and could go on until he is 86 years old.
Ik ben afgetreden als generaal-moderator.
I resigned as Moderator General of the work in 1981, but the Pope asked me to go on. I was ill at that time, and so I went to see him and I said, I would like to stop working and go back to my abbey to prepare myself for the big finale. He asked me, how old are you, Werenfried? He knew me well, but I said 71. For a moment he was deep in thought. I think he was praying, and then he said, well then, you must continue for another 10 years. After then you can go back to your abbey. And 3 weeks later I had completely recovered. So I went on preaching, and a few years ago I met him again, and he asked me, how old are you now? And I said, you already asked me that, Holy Father. I'm 76 now, but you told me to go on until I'm 81, so that's what I'm doing. Yes, he said. He noticed I was in good form, and this might be prolonged too. I'm a priest for eternity, so it's unthinkable for me that I would not fulfill my priestly duty as long as I can still work. And my priestly duty is this: to help the persecuted church, to provide it with pastoral support.
You are following in the wake of the early church when you bring help to churches in trouble throughout the world. Looking over your report, I was amazed to realize that your work is bringing assistance to religion in 115 countries. You deserve warm congratulations, dear Assembly participants, as equally do all the many members of Aid to the Church in Need.
It is proof that what he started became a success, but it is not for him personally, but for the church. And when he sees that things are working, that the chapel trucks in the first years were a real help for the people, then it's a success. When he sees that the Patriarch in Moscow today is happy with our help, it is a success. When we see that 300 sisters in Africa are close to African people, it is a success. If we have 35 million child's Bibles all over the world, it's a success. It's not a personal success, but it is a success for the kingdom of God on earth.
My abbot once said, I'm glad I have Werenfried, but I'm also glad I have only one Werenfried. I wouldn't say that about myself, would I? Many years ago, I heard Marlene Dietrich singing, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? I learnt it by heart, and I can sing it, but I'm not a good singer. I suggested to my abbot that we organise a tour with Marlene Dietrich.
Een keer had voorgesteld om een tournee te maken met Marlene Dietrich. Ik zou spreken en zij zou zingen. En ik dacht, dan zeg ik toch...
I would preach and she would sing. And I thought, the collections would then be twice as big. But my abbot didn't agree, and I said he was probably worried about the soul of Werenfried.
De zorg voor de ziel van Werenfried. De medebroeder.
But one of my confreres said maybe he was worried about the soul of Marlene. I'm not a saint.
Sag mir, wo die Männer sind. Wo sind sie geblieben? Sag mir, wo die Männer sind. Was ist geschehen? Sag mir, wo die Männer sind. Zogen fort, der Krieg beginnt. Wann wird man je verstehen?
Wann wird man je
verstehen?
Sag mir, wo die Blumen sind. Wo sind sie geblieben? Sag mir, wo die Blumen sind. Was ist geschehen? Sag mir, wo die Blumen sind. Mädchen pflückten sie geschwind. Wann wird man je verstehen? Wann wird man je